The key didn't work. I stood there in the October rain, my duffel bag getting soaked, staring at the brass lock that had opened to my touch for 3 years. The same lock I'd turned 1,000 times, coming home from work, from the gym, from training sessions with my tactical recruits. Now it might as well have been welded shut. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Well, isn't this just perfect? I muttered, fishing out my phone. The screen lit up with 17 missed calls from Fiona, my wife, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-wife, judging by the circumstances. The townhouse looked the same from outside. Same red brick facade, same black shutters I'd painted last spring, same flower boxes Fiona had insisted on but never watered. But something felt different. Wrong. Like when you're clearing a building and your gut tells you there's someone waiting around the corner. I pressed the intercom button for our unit. 3B, home sweet home. Cole? Fiona's voice crackled through the speaker, tinny and distant. Yeah, it's me. Key doesn't work. Did you change the locks? A pause. Long enough for me to count the raindrops sliding down the glass door of our building's entrance. Long enough for my stomach to drop into my boots. Don't make a scene, okay? We need to talk, but not here. Not like this. Fiona, I've been gone for a month training recruits in Virginia. I'm tired, I'm wet, and I want to come home. Open the door. Cole? Another pause. I've moved on. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. Moved on? In a month? I'd been gone exactly 31 days, training a batch of wannabe security contractors who couldn't tell their rear ends from their elbows. 31 days of teaching basic tactics to college kids who thought Call of Duty qualified as military experience. Moved on, I repeated slowly. That's interesting timing, Fee. Care to elaborate? Please don't do this here. I'll call you tomorrow and we can... The intercom went silent. I stood there for a moment, processing. 3 years of marriage, 8 years together total, and she dumps me through a door speaker like I'm some kind of stranger. My tactical training kicked in automatically. Assess the situation, identify resources, plan next move. Resource identification. I was locked out of my own home with nowhere to go and about $40 cash. But I had advantages Fiona didn't know about, like the fact that I'd gotten friendly with Steve Kowalski, the building's night security guard, during my many late returns from work. I walked around to the service entrance and knocked. Steve's round face appeared in the reinforced glass window, breaking into a grin when he saw me. Cole. Hey, buddy, you're back. How'd the training go? Like trying to teach calculus to golden retrievers, I said, forcing a smile. Listen, Steve, I've got a problem. Fiona changed the locks and I can't get into my own apartment. Steve's face fell. Aw, man. That sucks. Marital problems? Something like that. I pulled out the bottle of bourbon I'd bought at the airport. I don't suppose you could help me out. I've got security footage access for the building, right? As a resident? Steve's eyes lit up at the sight of the bourbon. Good old Steve. Predictable as sunrise. Well, I mean, technically residents can review footage if there's been a security incident. There has been, I said grimly. Someone's been in my apartment without my permission. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Steve's cramped security office, watching a month's worth of hallway footage on fast forward. Steve had cracked open the bourbon and was nursing it while I scrolled through digital days and nights. Then I saw it. Day 3 after my departure. Fiona coming home at 11 p.m. But she wasn't alone. A tall, thin man in an expensive suit followed her down the hallway. They were holding hands. You know this guy? I asked Steve, pausing the footage. Steve squinted at the screen. Oh yeah, that's Grant something. Lorne, I think. He's been coming around a lot lately. Nice car, real fancy dresser. Grant Lorne. The name hit me like ice water. I knew exactly who Grant Lorne was. Senior associate at Morrison, Blake and Associates, the law firm where Fiona worked as a junior attorney. 38 years old, divorced, drove a BMW, and had the kind of smugness that made you want to rearrange his face with a crowbar. I kept scrolling. Grant appeared again the next night, and the next, and the next. Always leaving in the morning around 7, always looking like he owned the place. In one particularly clear shot from day 12, I could see him wearing my University of Maine sweatshirt. My sweatshirt. The one Fiona had bought me for my birthday 2 years ago. Snake, I whispered. What's that? Steve asked, looking up from his bourbon. Nothing, just processing some information. I copied the relevant footage to a flash drive. Another small favor Steve was happy to provide for a friend. Then I sat back in the squeaky office chair and thought, Fiona wanted to play hardball? Fine. But she'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent 12 years in the Army, 4 of them as an infantry instructor. I'd trained hundreds of soldiers in tactics, strategy, and psychological warfare. I'd been teaching corporate security teams for the past 5 years, showing executives how to think like their enemies. Fiona had no idea what she'd just unleashed. I pulled out my phone and called the landlord. Mr. Ormsby was old school, the kind of guy who still believed in handshake deals and tenant loyalty. He'd always liked me better than Fiona anyway. Mr. Ormsby? It's Cole Mercer from 3B. I need to discuss the lease situation. The rusty anchor hadn't changed in the 5 years I'd been coming there. Same sticky floors, same neon beer signs, same smell of fried food and broken dreams. It was the kind of place where everybody knew your business and nobody judged you for it. Barb Henley stood behind the bar, polishing glasses with mechanical efficiency. She was 50-something, built like a linebacker, and had been running the anchor since her husband passed away in a fishing accident 10 years back. More importantly, she was plugged into the local gossip network like a fiber optic cable. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she said when I walked through the door. "Heard you were down south teaching kids how to play soldier." Something like that. I slid onto a bar stool and nodded toward the bourbon selection. "Jameson, make it a double." Barb poured without comment, studying my face. "You look like hell, Cole. What's eating you?" Fiona kicked me out. Changed the locks while I was gone. That little... Barb caught herself, glanced around the mostly empty bar. "Sorry, I know she's your wife. Was my wife. Apparently she's moved on to bigger and better things." Barb leaned across the bar, lowering her voice. "Grant Lorne." I looked up sharply. "You know about that?" "Honey, I know about everything that happens in this town. Grant's been bragging to anyone who'll listen about his new conquest. Says she's going to help him make partner at that fancy law firm." The bourbon burned going down, but not as much as the confirmation of what I'd suspected. "How long has this been going on?" "Best guess? Started before you left for Virginia. Maybe a week or two before. Grant was in here about 6 weeks ago, drunk off his ass, talking about some married honey he was working on." 6 weeks. So Fiona had been planning this for at least 2 weeks before I left. While she was kissing me goodbye at the airport, telling me she'd miss me, she was already planning to replace me. "There's more," Barb continued, refilling my glass without being asked. "Word is, Grant's been using company resources to impress her, taking her to client dinners, using the firm's box seats for baseball games, that kind of thing. That's against company policy." "Sure is. Morrison, Blake is real strict about that stuff. They fired a guy last year just for padding his expense account." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found what I was looking for. Margaret Denton, Human Resources Director at Morrison, Blake and Associates. I'd met her at a company security seminar I'd taught 6 months ago. Nice woman, very professional, very by the book. "Barb, you still got that notary license?" "Sure do. Why?" "I need to freeze some joint accounts, tonight." Barb's eyes lit up with understanding. "Now we're talking. What else you need?" "Information. I want to know everything about Grant Lorne, where he lives, where he hangs out, who he owes money to, what skeletons are rattling around in his closet. That's going to take some time." "I've got nothing but time. And Barb?" I slid a $100 bill across the bar. "Discretion is important." The money disappeared into her apron. "What money? What conversation? I don't even know you." I spent the next 3 hours at the anchor, making phone calls and setting wheels in motion. First, I called our bank and froze all joint accounts pending legal separation proceedings. Then I called our credit card companies and did the same thing. Fiona would wake up tomorrow to find her plastic worthless. Next, I composed a carefully worded email to Margaret Denton, attaching the security footage Steve had provided. I didn't make any accusations, just forwarded the material with a note that I thought she should be aware of potential policy violations involving company resources and employee conduct. By the time I left the bar, I had a plan. It wasn't complete yet. I needed more intelligence, more leverage, but the foundation was solid. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grant Lorne in my sweatshirt, walking out of my apartment like he owned the place. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Fiona. "Cole, what did you do? My credit card was declined at Starbucks." "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Sleep well?" "Don't play games with me. I know you froze the accounts." "Technically, I secured marital assets pending legal proceedings. It's perfectly legal. You should know that, being a lawyer and all." "You can't do this." "Actually, I can. Joint accounts require joint access. Since you changed the locks on our joint residence without my consent, I figured turnabout was fair play. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head. Cole, we can work this out. We don't have to be enemies. You're right. We don't have to be enemies. But you made that choice when you decided to screw around behind my back. I never... Fiona, I have security footage, lots of it, of you and Grant in our hallway, going into our apartment, him leaving in the morning wearing my clothes. I let that sink in. So let's skip the part where you lie to me and jump straight to the part where we discuss terms. Another long pause. What do you want? I want you to think about what you've done. Really think about it. Then I want you to think about what happens next. Because this is just the beginning, Fee. You wanted to play hardball? Congratulations. You just stepped into the major leagues. I hung up and smiled for the first time in 24 hours. The Morrison, Blake, and Associates building was downtown Portland's attempt at corporate sophistication, all glass and steel, reaching toward the gray October sky like a middle finger aimed at the working class. I'd been there before, teaching security seminars to their white-collar employees who thought identity theft was the worst thing that could happen to them. I parked across the street and watched the morning routine unfold. Lawyers and paralegals hustling through the revolving doors, clutching coffee cups like lifelines. At 8:47 a.m., Grant Lorne's silver BMW pulled into the executive parking area. He climbed out looking every inch the successful attorney. Tailored suit, Italian shoes, hairstyled to perfection. But I noticed things other people missed. The way he checked his reflection in the car window, the slight hitch in his step that suggested old sports injuries, the fact that he parked in the spot farthest from the building entrance, vanity parking, where door dings were less likely. A man who cared that much about appearances had vulnerabilities. My phone rang. Barb. Got some intel for you, she said without preamble. Your boy Grant's got some interesting habits. I'm listening. He owes money. Big money. Gambling debts to some unfriendly people down in Boston. Word is he's been living way beyond his means, trying to keep up with the partners at his firm. That explained the expensive car and clothes. Classic overextension. What else? He's married. I nearly dropped the phone. What? Separated, but still legally married. Wife's name is Linda, lives up in Bangor. Apparently Grant's been telling people he's divorced, but the paperwork never went through. Something about asset disputes. This kept getting better. Grant wasn't just an adulterer, he was a bigamist in waiting. If he married Fiona before his divorce was final, both marriages would be invalid. Barb, you're a treasure. I know. What are you going to do with this? I'm going to have a conversation with an old friend. Margaret Denton's office was on the 15th floor, all polished wood and legal books. She was a small, precise woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. When her secretary showed me in, she was reading something on her computer screen with obvious displeasure. Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming in. Please, have a seat. I settled into the leather chair across from her desk. I take it you reviewed the material I sent? I did. She turned the monitor so I could see it. The security footage was paused on a clear shot of Grant and Fiona entering my building together. This is quite disturbing. It gets worse. I have reason to believe Mr. Lorne has been using company resources to facilitate this relationship. Client dinners, entertainment expenses, that sort of thing. Margaret's lips tightened. Do you have proof of that? I'm working on it, but I thought you should know that there may be additional policy violations beyond the obvious ethical issues. Mr. Mercer, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. However, I should point out that your wife is also an employee of this firm. Any disciplinary action could affect her as well. I understand, but Fiona's a junior associate. Grant's in a position of authority over her. If there's been any quid pro quo arrangement, promotions, assignments, favorable treatment in exchange for personal favors, that's a much more serious violation. Margaret nodded slowly. We'll be conducting a full investigation. In the meantime, I'd appreciate your discretion regarding this matter. Of course. I just want what's fair. I left the building feeling like I'd planted a very effective time bomb. Corporate investigations took time, but they were thorough. And Margaret Denton struck me as the type who didn't tolerate policy violations, regardless of who was involved. My next stop was Grant's apartment building, a high-end complex called Harbor View Towers. More glass and steel, more valet parking, more pretentious nonsense designed to separate the wannabes from their money. I didn't go inside. Instead, I found a coffee shop across the street and settled in to observe. Intelligence gathering was 90% patience and 10% opportunity. I'd learned that lesson in the Army, and it applied just as well to civilian operations. At 12:30, Grant emerged from the building and walked to a nearby restaurant. I followed at a distance, staying casual, just another pedestrian in the lunch crowd. He met Fiona at an upscale bistro called Le Bernardin. I watched through the window as they held hands across the table, sharing some private joke. Fiona was wearing a new dress, something expensive and red that I'd never seen before. Grant's money, no doubt. I took pictures with my phone, not for legal purposes. Maine was a no-fault divorce state, so adultery didn't matter in court, but pictures were useful for other things. They finished lunch at 1:45. Grant paid with what looked like a corporate credit card, another potential policy violation. Then they walked back toward his building, stopping frequently to kiss and whisper to each other like teenagers. I felt a familiar cold rage building in my chest, not the hot, explosive anger that made people do stupid things, but the calculating fury that made tactical planning possible. Fiona had thrown away 8 years for this? For a debt-ridden wannabe with commitment issues and a gambling problem? Fine. If she wanted to trade down, that was her choice, but she was going to learn exactly what kind of man she'd chosen. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stay away from Fiona, or you'll regret it. G. I stared at the message for a moment, then started laughing. Grant Lorne thought he could intimidate me. A man who'd never faced anything more dangerous than a hostile deposition was trying to threaten someone who'd spent a decade teaching people how to ruin efficiently. I typed back, "Looking forward to meeting you in person. We have a lot to discuss." The response came immediately. "Anytime, anywhere. Old man." Old man. That was rich, coming from someone who probably couldn't do 10 push-ups without having a cardiac event. I had an idea. A wonderfully devious idea that would solve multiple problems at once. I texted back, "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Anchor Bar on Commercial Street. Come alone." "See you there." I smiled and finished my coffee. Grant Lorne wanted to play tough guy? Perfect. I'd give him exactly what he was asking for. The Anchor was busier than usual for a Thursday night. Word had gotten around that something was going down. Barb's gossip network worked both ways, and she'd made sure the right people knew to be there. Not enough to make it obvious, but enough to ensure witnesses. I arrived early and claimed a table in the back corner, positioning myself so I could see both entrances and keep the wall behind me. Old habits from places where people shot at you for disagreeing with their politics. Grant walked in at exactly 8 p.m., looking around nervously. He dressed down for the occasion, jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than most people's car payments. But he still looked like exactly what he was, a privileged rich boy playing dress-up in a working-class bar. I raised my hand and waved him over. "Grant, good to finally meet you in person." He approached cautiously like he was walking into a trap. Smart man. He was. "Cole Mercer, I assume." "That's right. Have a seat. Can I buy you a drink?" He remained standing. "I'd rather keep this short." "Suit yourself." I took a sip of my bourbon and studied him. Up close, he was even less impressive than I'd expected. Soft around the middle, manicured fingernails, the kind of pale complexion that came from spending too much time indoors. "So, Grant, can I call you Grant? We seem to have a mutual interest." "If you're talking about Fiona?" "Oh, I'm definitely talking about Fiona. See, here's the thing that's got me confused. My ex-wife, tells me she's moved on to bigger and better things, but when I look at you, I'm having trouble seeing the bigger and better part." Grant's face flushed red. "Listen, you son of a... Careful." I didn't raise my voice, but something in my tone made him stop mid-sentence. We're having a civilized conversation here, no need for name-calling. He sat down heavily, trying to regain his composure. "What do you want?" "Information. See, I've been doing some research on you, Grant. Very interesting stuff. Did you know that your credit rating is in the toilet? Gambling debts, overextended credit lines, missed payments on that fancy car of yours?" His face went white. "How did you?" "I used to do corporate security consulting. Amazing what you can find out about someone when you know where to look." I leaned forward. "Here's what I'm wondering. How exactly are you planning to support my ex-wife in the style she's become accustomed to when you can barely support yourself?" "That's none of your business." "Actually, it is my business, because Fiona's been spending money that legally belongs to both of us. Money that's now frozen, by the way. So unless you're planning to pick up the tab for her expensive tastes, she's going to be very disappointed very soon." Grant's jaw worked silently. I could see him trying to process the implications. "There's something else," I continued. "I had an interesting conversation with Margaret Denton at your office yesterday. Seems there's going to be an investigation into potential policy violations. Something about misuse of company resources for personal entertainment." Now he looked genuinely panicked. "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to prove anything. I just have to raise questions. Corporate investigations are funny things, Grant. Once they start digging, they tend to find all sorts of interesting information, like expense reports that don't add up, credit card charges that can't be justified, patterns of behavior that suggest ethical violations. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the pictures I'd taken at lunch. Nice restaurant yesterday. I'm sure the partners at Morrison, Blake, would be very interested to know that you're using company funds to wine and dine junior associates. That's not... We were discussing a case. Really? What case? I'd be happy to verify that with Margaret. Grant slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him. What do you want? I want you to understand the situation you're in. See, Grant, you thought you were stealing my wife. But what you actually did was inherit my problems. Fiona's got expensive tastes and no money to support them. She's got career ambitions and no talent to achieve them. She's got a sense of entitlement that would make a Kennedy blush. I finished my bourbon and signaled Barb for another. The difference is, I knew all that going in. I married her anyway because I thought love could overcome character flaws. But you? You're getting the full package with none of the history. Good luck with that. You're trying to scare me. No, Grant, I'm trying to educate you. Because in about a week, maybe 2, you're going to wake up and realize that Fiona expects you to solve all her problems. The frozen bank accounts? That's your problem now. The credit cards that don't work? Your problem. The fact that she's probably going to be suspended or fired when the ethics investigation concludes? Also your problem. I stood up and tossed a 20 on the table. But here's the really fun part. You can't solve those problems because you're broke. Worse than broke. You're in debt to people who break kneecaps for a living. So when Fiona figures out that her knight in shining armor is actually just another loser with delusions of grandeur, what do you think she's going to do? Grant stared at me, his face pale and sweaty. She's going to dump you, I continued, just like she dumped me. Because that's what Fiona does when things get difficult. She finds someone else to solve her problems. I leaned down close to his ear. The only difference is, I'll be long gone by then. You'll be stuck holding the bag. I walked away, leaving him sitting alone at the table. Around the bar, I could see people pretending not to watch, but I knew they'd heard every word. By tomorrow morning, half the town would know that Grant Lorne was broke and in debt to dangerous people. Phase 1 of my revenge was complete. Now came the really fun part. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 a.m., Fiona crying. Cole, please, I need help. I sat up in my motel bed, instantly alert. What's wrong? They fired me. Morrison, Blake fired me yesterday. They said I violated company policy, that I was involved in some kind of financial misconduct with Grant. Where's Grant? Can't he help you? Grant's gone. He cleaned out his desk Tuesday and left town. Nobody knows where he went. His apartment's empty, his phone's disconnected. Cole, I don't have anywhere to go. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity. But then I remembered Grant wearing my sweatshirt, remembered Fiona telling me through the intercom that she'd moved on, and the feeling passed. That's rough, Fee. Really rough. Can we talk? Maybe work something out? I made a mistake, Cole. A huge mistake. I'm sure you did. But here's the thing. I've moved on too. What do you mean? I looked around the motel room that had been my home for the past week. It wasn't much, but it was honest. No pretense, no lies, no hidden agendas. I mean, I've been doing some thinking while you were playing house with Grant. About us, about what went wrong, about what I really want out of life. And you know what I figured out? What? I figured out that I'm better off without you. Silence on the other end. Fiona, for 8 years I tried to be the man you wanted me to be. I bought you expensive things I couldn't afford. I put up with your friends who treated me like hired help. I ignored the way you talked down to me in public, the way you made me feel like I wasn't good enough for you. That's not... Let me finish. When you kicked me out, when you changed those locks, you did me the biggest favor anyone's ever done me. You forced me to take a hard look at my life and ask myself a question. Why was I fighting so hard to keep something that made me miserable? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where my truck sat next to a dozen other vehicles belonging to people who were just getting by, just making it work, just living honest lives without pretense. The answer is, I shouldn't have been. I should have walked away years ago. Cole, please, I'm not angry anymore, Fee. I was, for a while. Angry enough to freeze the bank accounts, angry enough to send that security footage to your HR department, angry enough to have a very educational conversation with Grant about his financial situation. You did all that? I did all that, and you know what? It felt good. Not because I was hurting you, but because I was finally standing up for myself. For the first time in our entire relationship, I stopped being the accommodating nice guy who just took whatever you dished out. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. But here's what I learned, Fiona. Revenge is like junk food. It tastes good going down, but it doesn't nourish you. It doesn't build anything positive. It just fills a temporary need. So what are you saying? I'm saying I'm done. With the revenge, with the anger, with trying to punish you for being who you are. I'm especially done with trying to fix a relationship that was broken from the beginning. We could try counseling. No, we couldn't. Because the problem isn't that we don't communicate well, or that we have different love languages, or any of that pop psychology nonsense. The problem is that we're fundamentally incompatible people who stayed together out of habit and fear of being alone. I sat back down on the bed and rubbed my eyes. You want someone who can give you the lifestyle you think you deserve. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, a house in the right neighborhood, friends who drive the right cars. I want someone who values me for who I am, not what I can provide. I did value you. No, Fiona. You valued what I could do for you. There's a difference. Another long silence. So that's it? 8 years, and you're just walking away? 8 years, and I'm finally smart enough to walk away. Before we waste another 8 years making each other miserable. What about the house? The accounts? The divorce? Keep the house. I never liked it anyway. Too pretentious for my taste. The accounts are already separated. As for the divorce, my lawyer will be in touch. It'll be fair and simple. No fault, no drama, no fighting over who gets the good china. You have a lawyer? I have a lawyer. A good one. Someone who understands that sometimes the best victory is knowing when to stop fighting. I could hear her breathing on the other end, trying to process what I was telling her. Fiona, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening? Yes. I forgive you. What? I forgive you for cheating on me. I forgive you for lying to me. I forgive you for changing the locks and trying to humiliate me. I forgive you for 8 years of making me feel like I wasn't good enough. Cole, I don't forgive you because you deserve it. I forgive you because I deserve it. Because carrying around all that anger and resentment was poisoning me, and I'm done being poisoned. I stood up and started getting dressed. It was time to check out of this motel and find a real place to live. A place that was mine, where nobody could change the locks on me ever again. This is goodbye, Fiona. I genuinely hope you figure out how to be happy. But I hope you figure it out with someone else, somewhere else in a life that doesn't include me. Cole, wait. I hung up the phone and turned it off. Then I packed my bag, checked out of the motel, and drove to the bank to open a new account. Just mine. Nobody else's name on it. Nobody else with access to it. It felt like the most liberating thing I'd ever done. 6 months later, I ran into Barb at the grocery store. She told me Fiona had moved back in with her parents and was working at a small firm in Bangor. Grant had apparently resurfaced in Florida, where he was selling insurance and living in a studio apartment. You ever regret it? Barb asked, letting her off so easy. I thought about it for a moment. No, I got exactly what I wanted. Which was? My life back. I paid for my groceries and walked out into the sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just refusing to let someone else's bad choices define your future. Sometimes the best way to win is to stop playing the game entirely.